On today's episode of the podcast, we have three OUA Oline coaches from across the province. And we've sent out a questionnaire for you guys. So we've got a ton of questions back. Really excited to hear their take on that. So without further ado, we're going to get started. I'll let these guys introduce themselves, and then we'll get to the questions. So, Matt, we'll start with you.
Matt Nesbitt. I'm the recruiting coordinator and offensive line coach at Queens.
Coach Scotto?
Yeah, Zach Scotto. I'm the offensive line coach at Wilfrid Laurier University.
And Coach Beardy?
I'm Randy Beardy. I'm the offensive line coach and recruiting coordinator at the University of Windsor.
Awesome. So I really thank these guys for giving up their time. We've been talking throughout the week about different stuff we wanted to hit on, but we got so many good questions that we're just going to roll through those. So the first set of questions is really based on recruiting. So the first one, is it better to focus on one position rather than being able to play center, guard, and tackle? What is kind of your guys' take on the versatility aspect there? And maybe is it different for a younger player versus a guy who's, getting into his fourth or fifth year of high school?
I'll jump it if nobody else is going to hop on. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jax, when, you're talking about where you're at in your career. If you're not in a position when you're in probably, grade 10 or 11, you haven't played a lot of high level football and you're not getting recruited, you want to diversify yourself as a recruit, whether that's, you're playing both ways or you're playing across the O-line, you're getting different aspects on film. One of the easiest ways to do that is actually by playing center. I'm sure the other guys on this video can attest. The more guys that can snap, the better you feel about your whole O-line. And if a recruit can show that, especially on film, but if they can show that they can snap and feel comfortable at center, that recruit is definitely viewed in a much brighter light. Because good offensive linemen that can snap are a dime a dozen. So I would definitely say if you're one of those recruits that the recruiting path isn't going the way that you would like it to at that point, then diversifying that profile is definitely important. But if you're a kid that's already getting recruited at a high level, you can basically go with what you're going with already, and then reevaluate when you get to that next level of how you want that career to look out in terms of your pathway to dressing and in terms of your pathway if you're deciding to go pro, how that pathway is going to look out. So I think that's how I'd look at it.
Coach Beardy?
I think it's important to understand case by case what you're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, it's a team game, and if the coach needs you to play a certain position, I get it. But there's guys, who are going to be centers that are playing tackle at the high school level or in summer ball. And, if you want to diversify in the sense that, I want to, make sure I'm good at playing all three, that's fine. Because some guys are going to be playing out of position. I think it's important. But at the end of the day, to me, we're not necessarily looking for, a really good center or a really good guard or a really good tackle. We're looking for good football players. It's the same thing for skill position players, being able to play special teams. If you can take what's, transferable between each position and get really good at those fundamentals, I think that's a huge aspect of it. I think having intelligent football players, tough football players, that's really what it comes down to. So it really depends case by case and what kind of situation you're in. The more you can do, the better, but the better that you can do, it's always good. So that's what I would say.
Coach Nesbitt?
Yeah, I would agree with these guys. There's just from recruiting the O-line positions, just kind of seeing everyone kind of their own little check box of what they want to see. And I think it's more so you want to see them move in space, you want to see them pull to kind of get them on film doing that. You want to see them knocking people off the ball. But I think at the end of the day, if you can show those kind of movement skills, you can show you just trying to get off the ball and knock people back, you're going to check a lot of boxes. It doesn't really matter what position you play. But the only thing I'd say position specific wise is just the snapping piece that Scotto touched on there. That's one piece where if you play the center position, especially if you're undersized, it gives that coach a little bit of more value for yourself. But at the end of the day, for myself, it's just kind of what do we see on film? Can you see them move in space? Can you see them knock people off the ball? And whether you're playing guard, tackle, doesn't really matter. So I don't think it matters what position you play, rather you show those pieces of your game.
And what can you do, A, to get bigger, and B, to get noticed at a smaller size? Anybody want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I can take that one for sure. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we touched upon a last topic a little bit. You know, the first thing that we're looking for, what I'm looking for anyways, is physicality. I want to see somebody that can move people. I want to see somebody that plays with a lot of heart, a lot of grit, a lot of determination, and really can show his athleticism. And I think that's an important part, is that if you don't have the length necessarily, then you have to show that you're a powerful hog daddy and that you can move. If you can do those two things, and then you're, a good quality person off the field, intelligent, I mean, there's something to work with there. At the end of the day, it's got to be a good fit. And, I think the more you can show on film when it comes to athleticism and strength, the better.
For sure. Coach Scotto?
Yeah, bang on. Like, I think, I'm not the same body type as Coach Beardy and Coach Nez by any means. I'm a 5'9" guy, so I was always fighting an uphill battle there. And if you are a smaller guy, whether that means you're a little lighter or whether that means you're a little shorter, you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. So the intangibles are huge, and you need to be a perfectionist. Anywhere you can get coaching, anywhere you can get technique, that's stealing an inch every day in everything you do. Watching extra film, asking for extra help, going out for practice a little earlier. You can never let a coach question anything that you're doing. So you really got to strive for that perfection. Obviously, you're never going to ultimately reach perfection. Nobody in the world is perfect in anything they do, but you got to strive to get as close as you can as an undersized guy, whether that's height or weight. You can't really give anybody like us on this video a reason to ever doubt you. As a smaller guy, you got to put all that stuff on film. You got to have every coach vouch for you. You got to have every teacher vouch for you. And the way you get that is by doing it the right way. So, being a technician, being an executionist, being a perfectionist, trying to do everything you can that, gives coaches confidence that you're going to overcome whatever it is that's holding you back, that you don't have control of, with the things that you can control.
For sure.
Yeah, that margin of error is just so much smaller, right?
Yeah.
Coach Nez?
Yeah, the only thing I agree with the only thing I'd add is just and it comes back to the position piece, is that if you're like an undersized offensive lineman, you're out playing tackle, it's super difficult to evaluate some of those pieces.
Yeah.
So when we kind of look at the film and it's like an undersized guy, we start thinking, okay, they're probably not a tackle body. They're probably more of like an interior guy. An interior guy, like, you want people that, like you both said, like, are physical and can drive people off the ball, and also the snapping piece too. So if you're playing tackle, it's very difficult to evaluate that. And to be honest with you, like, if you go through a whole season and all your film is tackle, other than maybe like junior days and prospect days and all those things, it's pretty difficult to evaluate. So if you're an undersized guy, hopefully your coach has you playing inside where you can be evaluated to what you would transfer to the USports level as well.
All right. So another thing too, it just you talked about trying to get bigger too. The last thing you want to do is just put size on for the sake of it. As an undersized guy, you got to use what you have to an advantage. For me, I talk a lot about momentum and just mass times velocity. And if your mass isn't very high, your velocity's got to be great. And the worst thing you can do is put on a bunch of mass that really hurts your velocity and slows you down. So, as best you can, stay lean, stay strong, and just continue to grind out in the gym. Eat clean and do the right things. It's going to happen or it's not. Just got to trust the process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a key thing. So many high school guys are so focused on their weight, and it's more so about their ability to be explosive, their ability to be strong. If your squat goes up 30 pounds, but you only gain 2 pounds, that's not a bad thing, right? If you're a stronger kid, right, that's going to translate a lot better than, I put on 15 pounds. Well, if you're still the same athlete, you're just 15 pounds heavier, that's not necessarily as productive a way to go. Other than size, and this kind of leans into the same question, other than size, what are you guys looking for? I think you guys have already touched on a lot of things, but if you were going to, bring it down to maybe 2 or 3 words, other than size, what are you guys looking for in an O-line recruit? You want to go first for that one, Coach Nesbitt?
Yeah, I'd say just be passionate with the process of developing. Offensive line is such a technical piece where if there's ever a question about your love for the game, it's very difficult to know and ensure that as a coach, you're going to give all the resources and they're going to take it. So you want to make sure that when coaches evaluate who you are as a person, they go in and they see from coaches, from peers and your teammates that you are the hardest working guy and you love what you do. especially like if you're like a guy that's not maybe a high-end recruit, they have to make sure that you love the game of football because football won't always love you back. And when that happens, you have to make sure that you're very passionate about developing and getting to the point where you're there on game day. So I think that like love for the game is super important.
Cool. Coach Beardy?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same thing. But for us, just having a high standard performance and being a tough physical individual, somebody that really has a complete background academically and in the weight room as well. Those are two areas that I feel like really bleed into the field. And, I always ask about community service too and what you can do out there and, what you want to do long term, how that affects you. Because I think, again, if you're a high achiever in a lot of different areas, it bleeds onto the field.
For sure. Coach Scotto?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with the other two guys. I would say for me, like the biggest thing is intangibles. So kind of what both guys touched on, but generalizing a little more, like who are you as a person? What's your character? Are you going to fit the culture of what it is that we're trying to do? So we always have a conversation between, myself and the rest of the group. Who do we want to be as a group? And we set that culture. And we're looking for guys that are going to come in and fit that culture and elevate that culture. So, high character, high levels of respect, high levels of hard work. The work ethic and the want are things that you ultimately have control over all the time. You don't have control over your size or your strength at all times and things like that, but you have control of kind of what Coach Nez said about, your love for the game. You have control over your want levels and your effort levels and the things that people see that you don't necessarily think about. You really do have more control over those things than you think. And we're looking for guys that really fit that mold of fitting to that culture and elevating that culture so that everybody else on the team, whether you're a running back or a DB or anything, can look at our group and know who we are. So that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, awesome. And I think the common theme there is that you need guys, obviously size helps, but you need guys that are going to come in and work hard and understand that it's a process. I think no matter how prepared you are for your first training camp, and this kind of leads into our next question, but no matter how prepared you are for that first training camp, day 3, day 4 hits you in the mouth. And yeah. You could have an older brother that's gone through it or maybe high school teammates that have gone through it. You can be a guy that's played on, Team O's or really, really good high school programs. It almost doesn't matter. You've never been in a situation that tests you that way. And I think, when you guys at that point, size doesn't help you on day 4 of training camp as much as that other stuff does. So I think that's a great point. This brings me to our next question. What's the biggest key and, maybe for a lineman, but maybe in general, of you making the jump successfully from a good high school player to being a good youth sports player? What do you guys think that if there's one key factor or trait or whatever it is that helps or you've seen help guys make that jump more successfully?
I think it is gonna differ person to person. Based on the experiences they've already had with football, based on the coaches they've had, based on the teammates they've had around them. But if I were to boil it down to a generalization that could fit anybody, the trait that I would say has fit best, I would probably say perseverance. Using Coach Nesbitt's analogy that, you got to love the game, but the game's not always going to love you back. And going off of what you said, Jax, that, day 2.5, day 3 of your first training camp, those thoughts are going to creep in everybody's mind of, is this really what I want to do for the next 4 to 5 years? And remembering, what got me into this, remembering the love for the game and then persevering through those hardships, persevering through that, second hour of film when you've had a 2-a-day and it's your second meeting of the day and you're tired and you're sweaty and you're hungry and having to work through that with the guys beside you and having to work through that on your own even is difficult. And then when you're working for your first set of midterms and you're going into the gym when there's 400 other people there writing your first set of finals, perseverance is going to get you through a lot. And it's hard to build that. You got to have that mentality of, I don't care what gets put in front of me, I'm going to find a way to get through it. But you build that with experience, and you got to take challenges head on. And I think that falls into kind of what all three of us were talking about on the previous question, that you got to love what you're doing and be willing to work for it. So I would say perseverance is the biggest one, because challenges are coming, and the only way you're going to overcome them is by persevering through them.
Coach Beardy, anything to add to that?
I think perseverance is obviously a big one. Want to try to persevere through as much as possible. No, I'm joking.
The one
you want to go ahead, Nesbitt. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just go from like a different point of view. Is like, that's obviously a good answer, but it's like, I think for guys that you see come to the league and impacted and play early, I think if you were to take like one piece from like a tackle and an interior spot, from like tackles, I think we could all agree with it. Like, if you're coming and going to the U Sports level and you're just long as hell, it is what it is. Like, if you're like 6'6", you can get away with like a lot of bad technique and not really knowing what you're doing and compete, And then the other piece is like, if you're an interior guy, just being like, it is what it is, like being strong, And I kind of say that to guys of like, if I were to say the one piece that's the most important, is like your strength as an interior guy, because that's like the one position where you're physically going against someone, where you're going against a guy that's like 23 years old and he benches 225 20 times and you come in at 3. There's going to be a lot of like difficulty there, where if you're like a skill position, you run a 4-4 man. If you can get off some coverage, you're running a 4-4 no matter what day it is, But when you go in the trenches, it's a lot of like me versus you, and if you're younger and you're coming in, you're not physically ready to go, it's going to be very difficult to succeed as an interior O-lineman. So from a tackle standpoint, I think if you were to have length, you can lack some things. And from like an interior standpoint, if you're just strong as hell, lower body wise, upper body wise, you can hide a lot of shit too. Oh, sorry. I don't know if I'm supposed to. That's kind of my take on it. And it's a little different, but I think for some of those guys that have aspirations to come in and play early, those are things that, even if you don't have time to develop technically in like a U Sports program, those things help you come in and still compete even in your first year. So,
for sure. Anything else there, Coach Beardy, or are you good with that one?
Yeah, no, I would actually say, to me, biggest key for making a successful transition, what is success? We have to define what that is. For different athletes, it's going to be different things. I know when I came into school, when I went to university, I didn't really have an idea that I was going to play early on. My goal was just to make the team. And I ended up just putting my head down working and getting an opportunity to start right away. But that's not going to be the case for everybody. So define what success is. And at the end of the day, it has to marry what success looks like for the team. And if that means that you're not playing or you're not dressing or whatever it is, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, it's all part of your personal growth. Some great people, some great athletes, very successful people in their areas have sat behind and they've learned and they've grown and gotten better. So I think that's a huge part of it. I think some people want to rush onto the field. Some people want to rush into opportunities before they're ready for it. Because to me, if you're playing bad football and you're hurting the team, that's not a positive position to be in. You want to always be out there playing your best. And then really, like, if you're trying to go out there and compete for a position right away, I think it comes down to compete level. You got to go out there. There's going to be time for you to develop as a football player and really get that opportunity to grow and be ready to go in 4 days. That's pretty much how long training camp is in the OUA. You get the week prepping for the next team, but to compete against the other guys, you get pretty much 4 days. And then you got to be fearless. You're going to an 18-year-old potentially going up against 24-year-olds. It's a big transition, but you got to be able to make it and man up at those moments. Then really, you just can't do it on your own. You have to be selfless. You have to have some humility, and you got to ask for help, whether it be from veterans or, from a coach or whoever it is. You got to ask for some help and be guided along the path.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys too, especially offensive linemen, if you're a big time recruit, right, you're probably a big strong kid who's played Team Ontario or played at a big time program. Maybe you were even at a prep school in the States. Oftentimes you haven't failed a lot as a high school player, right? Like, let's face it, Coach Nesbitt, talked about how length covers up a lot of stuff. If you're a 6'4", 6'5" tackle, in high school, you're probably not getting coached that much in your senior year because you're not losing a whole lot in your senior year. So I think a lot of guys, they got to make that transition where, like Coach Beardy just said, all these guys touched on. I remember my first one-on-one in training camp was S.A. Marabere Jofu. Now, I didn't know at the time he was going to end up being a 4th or 5th overall pick in the CFL draft, but I found out real quick that high school was different from university football. And so guys got to be, you got to be fearless. You got to have that compete level, but you also got to understand, you're not going to walk into a university program wherever you are or whoever you are and light it up and not have any failure. Right. Yeah. If you think that that's what's going on, you're not in touch with reality. So I think that that's what big thing for guys is you don't want to be happy losing. You never want a guy that's happy losing, but you also got to understand that's part of the process, right? And even the best players we've coached, the best guys we've been around, right, lose one-on-ones. They think they had a great play on film, and you look at it and you got 3 or 4 things you actually want to correct, and it kind of comes back to Coach Nesbitt talking about being passionate about the process, especially at O-line. It's a long haul.
Yeah,
right. It's not about where you're at, even in October of your first year, never mind, on your 3rd day in training camp. So I think that's a big one that a lot of guys are kind of uncomfortable with because they feel like, I got to come in and if I'm going to start, I got to be the big bad bully. And you do, but you also got to understand, your confidence can't get shaken when you've lost 2 or 3 reps or, you've made a mistake and you tried to fix it and you didn't fix it the first time. Because for a lot of guys, I think that's a new thing. That'd be kind of my take on that question. So those are all really good.
Can I jump something off of what Coach Beardy said there? Like the idea of being able to ask for help is huge. I've had this conversation with some of my guys and some guys that I've coached who are a little younger as well. For whatever reason, society in general says, men aren't allowed to express that needing of help. But like in our sport with offensive linemen being the big bullies, the big mean guys, like the idea of being able to go and ask for help is not an easy thing to do. But kind of what leading on all of us said, like looking at whatever your version of success is and wanting to be the best player you can be, you're not going to do it alone, right? Whether that's you're talking to your head coach, you're talking to your positional coach, you're talking to your family, you're talking to somebody on campus. It really doesn't matter who the help's coming from or where you're getting it. Like you got to recognize now as a high school athlete going to the next level that it's not going to be just you. It's going to be a product of you, your coaches, your environment, your teammates, your guys on the O-line. You're going to become a product of your environment, not just you, right? So get comfortable with being able to ask for help because you're going to need it at some point in whatever avenue it is, whether that's with school, whether that's with mental health, whether that's with playbook, whether that's with technique. But getting comfortable with actually going up to somebody and saying like, hey, can you help me with this is a huge thing that because you haven't had to fail a whole lot in high school, that gets really, really hard for guys in the next level when they have to actually get to that point of having to ask for help. They don't know how to do it. But understand that, I know these guys really well in the video chat. Like you go up to any of us and say those words, like, I need help. Like, can you help me with whatever? You got to get comfortable being able to do that because you got to advocate for yourself. That's the only way you're going to be successful is being able to rely on the people around you as much as yourself. So great point, Beardy.
There you go. So we're going to switch more to, the on-field stuff. I thought that was great. So much of recruiting, is everyone's experience is different. And I remember as a high school athlete having a ton of questions. So it's great we were able to get some of those on the table. I got a lot of questions about outside zone. The first one comes from Coach Kevin at KCI in Kitchener. Do you guys teach the drop step on outside zone? And then if you had one drill, to work on your outside zone stuff, what would that be? I'll kind of let you guys just field answers for that one.
Outside zone standpoint, the drop step, like defining like losing ground on your first step. I teach that, and it's really like more so just trying like the goal of the outside zone is trying to get like a horizontal stretch in the defense and really trying to like threaten targets as much as possible to just get expansion of defenders. And so we teach the drop step to really with the premise of trying to like threaten someone to a certain location and create that horizontal stretch. So and then drill wise, what we do a lot of is we kind of find like in our combinations whose play side, whose like the play side man and the backside man combination, and just like a base 2-man combo. And we do a lot of like play side man drills where it's just literally them making the read. So it's kind of like you'll drop step, you'll throw your backside hand. I know Beardy and I have talked about it a little bit, but throw that backside hand to the midline of the defender. And we use that as like a reading tool of if our hat's placed side of it, we know we got to our target and we throw the play side and dent it. If we didn't, then we're going to try to like clean up the read and lock that backside hand and just knock that guy out. So the goal of it is to kind of get them to read off of their backside hand, that lead hand, we call it, as fast and as efficiently as possible. And we feel like that's probably the most important piece in like our outside zone combinations, because the uncovered guy is really reading off of that defender. You know, so if the play side make it clean and make it fast, then the uncovered man's job becomes a lot easier, and the backs too. So we do a lot, like we really focus on outside zone drill wise, is that that play side man, what his reads look like. So
Awesome. Coach Beardy?
So for outside zone for us, to kind of touch upon what he was kind of talking about, you know, when we throw that backside hand down the midline, we call that the compass, and the compass is going to tell us two different things. Either it's going to tell us we're reading true north, or it's going to tell us we're working east-west, okay? And essentially, if our head is at the midline or in front, we're going to start working vertical, and that's our true north look, where we're going to get square and we're going to drive through that outside shoulder, and we're going to try to climb to the second level. If we read east-west, that guy's he's got the gap. We feel like we can't reach him. Now we're going to take our Reggie, which is our big backside hand, and we're going to throw him front side and start working him down the line of scrimmage to try to create a little bit more stretch so that the running back can cut off of us. So for us, when we do drills, we try as best we can to progress through against air, then against distraction, and then try to go live. So we'll go through air. I think that's an important one because you just get to see their footwork and how confident they are without anything in front of them. And then from there, you add the bag, and you get to see them strike, work together in combo. And that's another thing, too, is we'll go individual, and then we'll add combinations. Then we'll go half line and then full line as well. All of it just progressing to what we're going to be doing in an either inside run or team setting. But, yeah, I mean, the more reps we can get with it, the better. Just trying to get that read on the compass and being consistent with our hips and our feet. When it comes to the drop step, we use a drop step. We call it a position step on the front side. On the back side, combos, we'll call it a drop step. Really what we're trying to do is get our hips to our aiming point. On the front side, our aiming point is going to be the front side armpit. And then on the back side, our aiming point is going to be 2 feet in front of the defender. So we'll drop there because we're in a closed position, meaning that our play side foot is in front of or forward relative to our backside foot. We're closed off to the defender. So we're going to drop to lose ground to open up our hips in that direction. On the front side, though, our hips are already open slightly to that direction, so we don't need to drop quite as much. It can be a little bit more aggressive laterally and keep our shoulders square as we work across the face of the defender.
Awesome. Coach Scotto, finish that one off.
Yeah, mine's I teach it a little bit differently. There's certainly elements of both that we use in terms of target points, in terms of feel on the opponent's body, on the defender's body. I teach it a little bit conceptually with leverage. So outside zone, we talk a lot about like, okay, this is our aiming point, right? Are they in a position to threaten our leverage, or are we in a position where we have leverage threatened on them already? And then working at it as a numbers game, because I'm sure these guys can attest as well. Defenses this year got more creative than we've ever seen, and a lot of our number counts have gotten a little weird here and there. So looking at it as a leverage standpoint, and understanding, okay, if I'm working to this number, I'm working to this guy. Am I covered or am I uncovered? If I'm covered, and I'm going to start toying with this language. I actually just stole this from another coach not long ago, but the idea of a man reach and a zone reach. So if I'm covered without help, I'm in a man reach. I got him one-on-one, so my target point's going to change a little bit. And then if I'm in a zone reach, determining whether I'm on the front side of the zone reach or the back side of the zone reach, which is where we use a lot of similar target points that the other two guys are talking about. And then in terms of the drop step, because I teach it from leverage, I don't teach it with a specific like cookie cutter idea, because a lot of the looks in front of you on defense can change. So I spent a lot of time this offseason working and talking with guys about the idea of like driving off the backside leg through whatever angle that we need to work through, with the big coaching points of, you know, my foot is driving through this angle, so that means my hips and my shoulders have to follow that angle. Because you see a lot of guys will try and drive, you know, say, for example, they're driving on a 20-degree angle, but their hips and their shoulders are on a 45-degree angle, which is going to cause shuffle steps, and you're never going to actually attack the leverage the way you want to attack the leverage. So we spent a lot of time working on driving off the backside leg. And honestly, like, you can go on YouTube and find an absurd amount of stuff off of how to drive off the backside leg, because it's a pretty big skill in a lot of different sports. So but I would say the easiest way is to literally just put a cone down somewhere within the line of scrimmage or in the neutral zone or above in front of the neutral zone, whatever angle you want to work on, and then say, I want you to cross this as you work through this path. And then you change the angle up based on different looks. So that's how we teach it.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we found with drop step is, it is a drop step, and I often find people, oh, I call it this, and it's really not all that different. But the big mistake guys make when they're giving up that depth, the drop part of the drop step, to get leverage, you need leverage. So whatever angle you have to work on, you need to put your hips on that angle, like Coach Scotto said. The biggest mistake guys make is they'll lose ground in that they'll pick that foot up and they'll drop it back and open their hips, but they won't gain 4 or 6 inches with that step. And then they wind up, like you guys were talking about for aiming points, they wind up in a situation where they can never get that true north read. And they're always behind it, and everything winds up cut back. So, I think that'd be my big point there for that one, is making sure that you gain ground horizontally. If you're giving it up vertically, if you're giving it up vertically, you got to get it horizontally, or you're really not getting anything out of it. The second question for outside zone is, what formations do you guys like running outside zone of? I know it's kind of maybe a general question, but is there any, formations that you guys like specifically to attack teams outside zone?
Here, first I want to say Beardy. That was the compass, everything. I loved it all.
Well, throwback. Eh?
Yeah,
I'm writing that down. I'm hoping that's not trademarked. That might find its way into another video
later. You should
have
seen Beardy the first time he brought it out. I remember him talking about the Reggie. He was so jacked up. I loved it.
Well, Reggie White shout out.
Yeah, the hump move. Yeah. But formationally, okay. So first, I'd say outside zone being like if that ball hits play side, which it should, that you're gonna like inevitably at some point the ball carrier is gonna get outside the tackle box. So I think the ideal world would be trying to get that ball just like out in space, so where there's no overhang, like where it's just like a one receiver surface, and you have like a team that's HBO'd or something like that, where you just create a huge tackle box drill for the ball carrier. I think that'd be first idea, like the ideal situation. I think secondly, if you don't have space, but you start having uncovered receivers, like uncovered down receivers, you can start like adding in uncovered down receivers into the box to really help. I think the biggest thing for the add-in piece is like helping to wall off the second backer in the box, because I think we can all agree there's not many times where that ball actually gets outside of the first read on outside zone. It's usually like that second read that you're kind of cutting off of. So I think the biggest effect that a linebacker or an add-in can have is actually on the second linebacker, walling off that backer, so that the O-line doesn't have to always be 100% reaching him. And then I'd say like the only other piece would be the one thing that I find that like destroys outside zone is if that play side tackle gets posted up right away. And if that's the case, all of a sudden you're not getting any horizontal movement on the play side, just destroys it. So then you're adding in like, do we add a wing back? Do we add a tight end surface to change their alignment, or to make sure that we're not allowing that D end to post us up? Right. So now you can get a combination on him and keep him on the line of scrimmage. So that's kind of like in a game planning standpoint, always the thought process, like get the ball in space. If not, see if you can add someone in with like a soft cover down guy. And then like, is the D end going to be posting someone up? And if so, how can we help that out? So.
Coach Scotto, you want to add to that one?
I pretty much took the words out of my mouth. I think the first thing you have to look at with outside zone is what are you as a play caller trying to get out of it? Are you trying to score touchdowns with it? Are you trying to get positive runs out of it? Are you trying to set a type of tone? What is it that you're trying to get out of it? And I think that answer will kind of dictate based on or will dictate how you decide formationally what you're going to try and do with it. I think the second thing you have to look at is who are my personnel. No offense to the big lugs out in the world, but if you got 5 big lugs playing O-line for you, you're probably not going to be too successful running outside zone. And then the third thing you want to look at is, who are my blockers and are they useful to me? And then how does the defense adjust? Right. So if you kind of like what Coach Nesbitt said, like if you can get to an isolated receiver side, like say, for example, you go 4 to the field, 1 to the boundary and the defense HBOs, and you got one guy, you got one-on-one in the boundary with the receivers and the rest is on the O-line. You probably want to attack that space in the boundary because it's one blocker for one guy and then the rest we got. And then if they don't give you that, then you're looking at what you're getting out of that run is going to be a little different. You're looking at using that uncovered guy, whether you add him to the box or you double down defender or, there's other ways you can run some pin and pull action too. It really depends on the surfaces you're getting from the defense too, but I would say trying to create mismatches. So never just lining up in ace 32 or just lining up in 22 two back, because those base surfaces get a little too easy for defenses to play against, unless you just have like a stud athlete O-line where it doesn't really matter what lineup you put in. But that's rarely the case in high school ball. So I would say trying to create unbalanced sets, whether you're on 23, 41, 31 two back, 21 with a tight and a full back, and then playing at where you can get numbers advantages and leverage advantages by using that, and then potentially using uncovered guys and either on down DBs or at the second level.
I think we've now covered every eligible offensive formation, but Beardy, are you hiding any in there you want to add to the outside zone conversation?
No, I'm okay. I'm good.
So last week, a lot of guys have questions because you see on TV all these different pass sets, and it looks very different in the American game. How do you guys teach guys to keep their hips square in a pass set? Is that a big priority for you? And what are your kind of coaching points around that? Coach Beardy, you want to start that one?
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, I think it's obviously really important to stay square in your pass set until you get to your spot at least, and forcing him to not, or the defender not to have a short edge and be able to round it quickly. It just forces him upfield and takes away a lot of his opportunities to attack off the edge. Now, for me, I look at like the ankle, the knee, the hip, and the shoulder. When I was playing, when I really like leaned in with my shoulder, my outside shoulder, it allowed me to stay square with my hips. And I have a natural bow in my foot and my ankle that, kind of forced me out there. But, for most times, so what we're trying to get is that closed ankle, closed hip, closed knee, and closed shoulder. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's never going to be perfect. I think just trying to fight for that position is a big one. I know, OLP, LaCharles Bentley does a lot of stuff with like posture tubes with his pad there too. It's all stuff you don't have to spend the $700 to get the equipment, but you can do similar drills that accomplish the same thing.
2 things that I would just say, and these guys I'm sure do the same. Independent hands, and for me, the one thing that I think I coach a little differently is I don't really coach shoulders. For like staying square, I talk more about like driving that outside kick knee in, and just driving that thing in as much as possible throughout the whole set phase. Because like the big thing I find is like if you just drive that knee in, you can't get external rotation from that outside hip. So if there's any like one, I think most efficient point, that's what I coach is just driving that kick knee in as much as possible, and then playing with independent hands. So if you're getting some type of hoop, like outside rush move, just playing with your outside hand, only keeping it square as long as possible until you inevitably do get hoop to your hip. And I think that's similar. I know, Scotto, I've heard kind of you talk about before. I think it's similar stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I was obviously on this with Coach Jacks last week and talked about stance and pre-contact, and I think those are the two those are the two things that within a pass set that you really do have ultimate control over, or the most control over, which I think is why most coaches spend a lot of time on those two things. Is, how do you line up? How do you get in a stance? And working on your sets, getting to the spot that you can control and the spot that you dictate. And I think if you're looking to drill that, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Honestly, like just some simple mirror type stuff. And I'm not saying necessarily like have two pads and have a guy where you go back and forth. I'm not saying mirror necessarily like that, but you can set a guy up on a line and have a defender across, and you're just working up through that pass set, working back and forth, and then you give a go to the defender to tell them that at that point, that's when they get to run the hoop, like Coach Nez said. So you're working kind of two skills at once. You're working that pre-contact idea of having to move and stay square regardless of where the defender goes, and then you give the defender that go, whether you're waving a towel in the air or you just say go or whatever. And you get to work like that finish idea of, okay, the defenders, beat me with the hoop or come across my face or engage in contact, where you get to add another element into it. So it's kind of old school mirror idea with some new school thinking. And then other stuff is honestly like resistance bands are super easy. You buy, one of the big thick ones for $20 off Amazon. You throw that on the VMO, the inside of the quad on that teardrop muscle, just like Coach Nez said. You want to have that outside knee pushed in, and it's really, really hard for the hip to externally rotate when that knee is inside the toes. So I would definitely say spend a lot of time focusing on that.
Yeah, I think, all three of you guys hit on a lot of similar points. I like Coach Beardy's thought where, because a lot of guys, you feel like you're forced to flip your hips. You don't want to, but you feel like you're forced to. And, concentrating on the different parts of your body in terms of, okay, am I not setting deep enough, and am I not getting enough depth with my hip, and that's what's forcing me to flip my hips early? Or, am I not using independent hands like Coach Nez said? I'm throwing that second hand across my body, and that's what's flipping my hips. Or am I not driving that outside knee far enough inside the foot? That was a big thing we talked about with Coach Scotto last week. So I think for a lot of young guys, and we get a lot of young guys that have never, even had that coaching point, like we kind of talked about earlier, a lot of big guys are being successful in high school without maybe that level of detail. And, I think that's a huge one, that ability to stay square. Next question is more of a technique to scheme related question. This one's from Cora Football. Shout out to them. They gave us a bunch of questions. If you're running a gap scheme, double team, so front side of power, front side of counter, and you're having a combination between the guard and the tackle, and I know there's probably a lot to talk about here, but if you were gonna break down how you coach the footwork with a 3-tech, a heads technique, and a 1-tech, what would be the things that change, I guess, between if there's a 3-tech and a 1-tech, and how are you kind of coaching those gap scheme doubles if you guys are running them? Coach Scotto, you want to start that one?
Penetration kills any gap scheme, whether that's counter power. Really doesn't matter. You have to cut off penetration first. So regardless of the technique that you have in front of you, the first thing you have to do is cut off penetration. So 3-tech, heads tech, or 1-tech, even a nose over the center, you have to cut off penetration so that they can't strip your puller. There's a lot of different verbiage. We call it angle drive. So you're gonna show kind of the similar thing. You're gonna kind of show the similar thing as outside zone or inside zone, where you're gonna step down towards that defender. And hopefully they step with you. So then they're helping you create the angle you want to get. But you gotta be ready to go, that if they're going to play to you right now, you gotta be ready to deliver, because if they dent you at all, it's not always going to happen, but it's potentially game over. Like the play is dead. So the first thing you have to do is cut off that penetration with your footwork, and then cut off penetration with your hands. And whether it's the 3-tech or 1, there's a couple different techniques. Some coaches teach step into a 3-tech and step down to a 1-tech. Some coaches say step down either way and then let the 3-tech play into you. It's on the tackle to bring the 3-tech down to the guard. However you're teaching it is gonna influence that, but I think regardless of how you teach it, the first thing you have to do is cut off the penetration first, and then get ready to deliver, in case they want to deliver to you, because there are as we can attest to from our playing days, there are some defensive tackles that like to just spike gaps, and all their main goal, regardless of what happens, is rush the gap, beat the gap, win the gap. However, they're being top of their whole thing is beat you up in that gap. So you got to be ready to deliver if they're going to deliver down on you.
From a footwork perspective, Coach Beardy, anything you guys do differently if you get a 1-tech versus a 3-tech in that sense?
Well, if we're talking gap doubles and or gap combos against like 1-tech versus 3-tech, like the 1-tech, we're not really going to see too much of a combo on it. I mean, we'll treat it more like a down block, and then our tackle will kind of power step down until that 1-tech's secure, and then he'll climb to the second level and really open his hips to his aiming point of the near shoulder of the linebacker that we're climbing to. But I mean, the big thing for us is we're just trying to fit it with a great leverage and understanding like what we're trying to accomplish. So, I mean, preferably, we have a guy who's going to tee off and a guy who's going to post up. If it's a 3-tech, the guard in the guard tackle combo, he's going to try to post the guy up and just make sure that he kind of keeps him moving in the right direction. And the guy, the tackle, he's going to really tee off and try to get that movement down towards where the linebacker is going to be so he can peel off and kind of drive the pile into the backer at the same time. So, I mean, the biggest thing for us is we'll always step to our gaps first, so whether it be a pin step, we just pick it up, put it down, or if we're just getting slightly vertical, we want to make sure that we're honest with that first step before we get into it, because I don't want the guard rushing into contact and now we're driving in the wrong direction as a unit. So, I mean, it can get overcomplicated, but I mean, to keep it simple, just move the guy into the other guy.
There you go. There you go. Hey, that's
people movers, man. People movers.
You can argue about inches here and there, but it's a results-based business for sure. Coach Nesbitt, anything you wanted to add to that?
Nope, I think it's good. I agree with all of it.
Just one question, because I know this is something that was really different for me in high school versus when I played at the USPORT level. If you have a 3-tech and you're the guard, are you stepping with your inside foot first, or are you going to step at that 3-tech? Kind of go back around the horn. Coach Scotto?
I step away from the 3-tech. So to help teach the idea of what it is we're doing and why, I tell my guys, like, show the defender inside zone. You're not stepping like inside zone, but show him inside zone so that he'll step with you.
Okay, Coach Beardy?
Yeah, we're going to step to our gap, so we're both going to step with our inside foot first.
This question also from the guys at Cora. Do you ever teach a flipper technique? Like, is there a situation that you would use that? Or is that something that you're not really seeing too much? I guess it's kind of scheme dependent too. So I'm going to start with Coach Nez on this one, so he doesn't get so upset.
I'd say, so if we're talking like inside zone, I teach the flipper for someone that is in a combination and he's backside covered. So he's not covered to the play side, so he's actually almost like recoiling back. So if he's in the framework of that guard or that O-lineman, to use a flipper, as soon as he starts getting out of the framework, just enough throw his body into it or like lose leverage on the linebacker to start working more of a punch with his hand. So that's kind of that's the situation where I use a flipper, and it's really just top between obviously the linebacker's leverage, but if we're just saying everyone's sound in their gap, it's really more so where's the defender aligned on you, and if he's in your framework, we're going with a flipper. If he's out of it, we're just going with a single hand punch.
And that's the play side guy in the combo. So say the center's working with the backside guard, combo into the mic.
Yeah, so it'd be like if the play side guy in the combo is uncovered and the backside guy is covered.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So like a center guard versus a one technique.
Yeah, gotcha. Coach Beardy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, we'd like to see guys use their hands as much as possible, but at the end of the day, if you're not strong enough, or if you're playing somebody that's a lot stronger than you, then getting the flipper involved or shoulder allows you to use your legs a lot more. So we'd like to take advantage of that. It also helps create a little bit of leverage and then to unravel when you get in there, really fire those hips through. I think a great example, which kind of just talked about it, is when we have a gap scheme double against a 3-tech. Our tackle, he's going to be shoulder striking, and when he shoulder strikes, we like to get the flipper involved. I'm open to either one, but I think the flipper just gives you more surface area, so you have a lower risk of missing, and then at the same time, to really get a little more power from the legs and drive through. It gets a couple more joints involved. The one issue with the flipper is just if you get held, you're just in tight, and then it doesn't give you a great opportunity potentially to get off to the second level. But at the end of the day, it's like we said, a movement-based business. And if we can move guys and be physical at the point of attack, that's a huge advantage for us. And, we want to make sure we take care of that first level first. So, I like to teach it. I like to use it, especially as a front side guy in doubles.
Nice. So we got Coach Nesbitt talking on the front side of a zone combo. Coach Beardy talking about as that tackle blocking down in a gap scheme combo. Coach Scotto, any other situations or which situations do you use that in?
Yeah, I agree with Coach Beardy that you want to use your hands as much as possible, but that's an ideal world, and we're in the business of trying to move people. And sometimes if you got to throw your body into it a little more, as long as it doesn't, similar to Coach Nez, as long as it doesn't compromise your leverage on what your second level responsibility is, then have at it, throw your body in there. But I would like to use hands as much as possible. The place that we do use it a lot actually though is in the pull game. Not necessarily like where we're focusing on the flipper specifically. We're more focused on, the big surface area of the chest. But it does lend itself to turning into the flipper as you're working to your hands. So there's, same shoulder, same foot. There's, putting your head on the inside. There's a whole lot of different coaching cues that guys use for it. But I like to talk about using that big surface area on the inside of your chest and putting your hat on the inside of it, so you're always kicking out with leverage. And then that big contact will naturally kind of lend to the flipper happening. But I don't want it to be that the flipper just stays hanging in there. I do want to get that contact and then work to hands.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I think another one too. I don't know how you teach cut blocking, but that's somewhere where I'd involve it as well. Because at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of kids, especially they don't know what it is, and when they try it, it's a lot of head contact. Mm-hmm. You get the flipper involved, it allows them to create some extension and really drive through the point of attack, so they're not just hitting it and stopping. So that's something I like to do. I'm not a big guy on the gator rule, so it just allows for you to drive through that point of.
So this one is kind of a scheme dependent question. Coach Eric Krebs actually, who's works with us at Laurier. Interesting guy to talk to if you're ever talking O-line and how that fits into scheme. But in terms of dealing with unblocked defenders in the box, so obviously it depends on what you're running, but most defenses are gap sound. There's usually going to be an unblocked defender or one more guy than we can block in most situations. How do you guys try and manage that? And that might not be an O-line technique thing, but in general in your run scheme, what do you kind of use to manage that player? And if you find that unblocked guy's making the tackle a lot, what are some of the answers? We'll start with you, Coach Nez.
I think formationally first would be a good one. Kind of what we talked about before, where if you can formation them and get some add-ins that have soft cover downs, that's ideal. And then I think looking at, obviously I saw you guys did a segment on the RPO game, obviously a good way to do it. And I think also just changing up who the free hitter is as much as possible. So if they start getting comfortable with a certain play, you like the way you're running a play, and whether it's like an inside zone and you're doing well knocking back the interior, or maybe it's an outside zone and you run it with success, but the free hitter is now getting comfortable making that play. It's now just about maybe adding some guys in to change, to block that free hitter and change who that now the new guy is that has to make that tackle, So there's many different ways to do that, of how you're going to kind of add in. But I think always trying to change up, if it's just a base defense and they're sound, changing up who that free hitter is if you want to stick to a play to kind of exhaust it throughout a whole game is ideal. And it's kind of what's needed. And if you don't do it, that free hitter is going to get in a good pattern of it. And at some point, okay, well, it doesn't matter how much I like this right now. That guy's made 6 tackles, So that's what I would kind of recommend.
For sure. And I think especially, when you draw it up, I often find you get stuff on the whiteboard on a Monday and you feel really good about, the front side of a run play. We used to have this with counter all the time. We'd feel really good about the front side and go, yeah, we just got to leave the backside end, or yeah, we just got to leave the backside guy. Well, if that backside guy's an all-Canadian, that's a problem. So I think
Boateng rule.
Yeah, changed how we ran counter. We literally haven't gone back. It's one of those things where you get stuff on the whiteboard and it seems simple, and then you get into a game and those unblocked guys cause more trouble than the block guys do sometimes. So do you have any specifics there, Coach Beardy, you want to land on, or anything you guys do in your offense to try and manage that guy?
I just want to say, I hope the unblocked guys make more plays than the block guys. That's be pretty big issues if it was the other way around. But I think there's two ways to look at it. I think Coach Nez talks a lot about it when it comes to first thing you want to do is try to out formation teams. But we're blessed being in Canada that we get to move freely behind the line of scrimmage with our skill position players. So, you can do a lot to really put pressure on guys to move laterally and then have to try to find their eyes and find their gap and fill late. It's not like the American League where, you're coming downhill as a safety and, you're going to fill into one of two gaps. With that said, though, I think the other way to look at it is sometimes the less you do when it comes to, trying to fool the free hitter or change who he is, the better you execute. And I really think at the end of the day, football comes down to, at what level are you executing, even less than or even more so than, the talent on the field per se. If you can execute at a high level and everybody's moving confidently, it doesn't matter that the defense knows what's going on. You're going to run successful plays more times than not. And then at the end of the day, too, you're forcing them to make the play consistently, which, I think everybody knows is tough to do. So just as, easy it is for an Olineman to have a bad game when, out of 69 or 70 plays, he did a great job on 69 of them, and then he gave up a sack on the last one. It's the same thing for, the Sam linebacker if he has, 10 tackles, but he gave up the huge run to lose the game at the end. It is what it is, so I think you can look at it both ways.
For sure. Coach Scotto?
Yeah, like elements from everybody. I think if you can change who the free hitter is and create confusion on the defensive part, am I filling this? Do I have to read? Am I getting read? Am I the unblocked guy? Changing how they're looking at, whether that's with formations or motions or anything like that is super important. But looking from a defensive perspective, defenses as a whole have to decide, when I call something, what is it I'm willing to give up? In the run game as an offense, you have to decide who am I willing to let make the play and where am I willing to let them make it. So if you're just looking at like two-back power, it's usually the backside linebacker, the third guy in that you're usually willing to let make the play. And at our level, and you can all test that will linebacker, if you run into the field, is usually a pretty good athlete. But so is the boundary end. And I don't want to go chasing that will linebacker at 4 yards when the boundary end is going to chase my hip and make the play at, -1 or even when the will linebacker can make the play at 4, right? I'll take that 4 yards in a pile over that 1 yard or even run all day. So I think you have to set some rules philosophically, whether that's between, you and your group or you and your coordinator, but deciding on, if this is what we're trying to get on the front side and the back side is potentially going to give us issue, what is it that we're willing to give up? And if we're not willing to give up that guy as a free hitter, how do we attack it then with confusion, with motion, with formation? I think is how you'd attack that.
Yeah, I think there's so much of it that comes down to, where are your trump cards, for lack of a better term? Where are your guys that can make plays? And, are you willing to trust, hey, in this matchup, we're going to leave this guy unblocked because it makes us really solid somewhere else? Or that's, how we execute the best, like Coach Beardy said. And then you run into some guys sometimes like, hey, we need an answer for this guy. And that might be, zone read. That might be RPO. Coach Nez talked about outside zone on cracking that linebacker at the second level. Those answers are really scheme specific, but I think the idea of being creative with formation, so that you can hopefully execute a simple play, but you're playing from a position where you're one guy ahead. Like for example, if you're 31-2 back and they're not going to HBO, you have numbers to the field. If they're going to HBO, you have space to the boundary. So, calling the game with and building your concepts with that in mind, I think is key. So I kept one question. I sent the guys the question earlier in the week. I kept one question because I wanted their honest, quick answer. So I didn't give them any time to prep for this. I got a couple questions. So first, rapid fire going around the group, because I know a lot of high school guys.
Around the horn.
Around the horn. There you go.
Around the horn.
Next week we'll have this.
Ding.
Next week we'll have the scoring system. I got to look into how to make that look good on the graphics, but if I'm a good enough producer to make that happen, we'll do that. So going around the horn, and we'll go snake
Put
draft
Nez first.
Yeah, Nez will go first, and we'll go snake draft coming back. If you're watching, one O-lineman's tape, if you're a high school guy and you're looking for, an O-lineman to watch, whether that's in the pros or at our level, if you could pick one guy to say, hey, yeah, if you're a tackle or a guard, whatever it is, you want to model your game after that type of player, anyone jump out quickly? Coach Nez.
Van Zyl with the Tiger Cats right now. He's like a technician. He's been in the league forever, played D-line, but the big thing I love with him is he's super efficient, and there's a reason he's been in the game for so long, where he literally does the least amount of work possible, but he does what he needs to be successful. And I think he's a great technician in the Canadian game.
Coach Scotto can be Canadian American. I didn't put that in the question.
If I'm looking at the American, if the first name that comes to mind is an American game, and maybe it's because I'm an inside guy, but I'm going right to Big Daddy Q. I'm going right to Quentin Nelson.
Chuck guys out of the club.
Yeah, he is violent beyond belief, and he's also a technician. He understands the game from a technical standpoint, and he also understands the game from a violent standpoint. And he had that one play where he picks off a guy on his, I think it was when he was still at ND, but picks off a guy on his, what was probably his third read, probably wasn't even his actual read, and just decleats the guy totally legally, and sees him at the last second. Like he understands the game from a heightened level, and he plays it at an incredible violent rate. He's definitely the guy you want to look at.
Coach Beardy?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing before I jump into it, watching NFL and CFL guys is great, but sometimes they can do things physically that other guys can't do. So be careful what you're watching and trying to steal from them.
Don't be Joe Thomas with the vertical stance.
Yeah, I think a great guy in the NFL is Jack Conklin. I think that in the CFL, I was lucky enough to play with a lot of guys. Sir Vincent Rogers, he's probably a guy you want to stay with because he's too athletic to really copy his game. But Nolan McMillan, he's a great one. Jason Lozon-Sege, Alex Mateus, those guys are all awesome. But if you really want to dig deep and get better, you want to watch the throwback Matt Nesbitt stuff.
I knew you were going to
some
say
of the
that.
best stuff.
I was going to say that about you.
You're going to see a star.
I was going to say that about you. You're not wrong.
There you go. We'll have to unearth the 2015 Matt Nesbitt cut-ups.
The All-Star.
There you go. So, guys, I really appreciate it. We got through a lot of stuff. I didn't get to all the questions, but selfishly, I wanted to get those two in for myself. So, it's been great having you guys on. Hopefully, I like the around the horn idea. We got to put some more time into that. I think my very average editing skills, I think I can achieve what I'd want in that segment. So honestly, guys, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I'll make sure to throw up your Twitter and stuff on there so the recruits know who to send their tape to. But three of the best O-line coaches in the business, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Much love, brother.
All right. See you guys.
See you.